Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and we have with us Alex Wild from Cycle Sports, from Carbs Nutrition, or Carbs Fuel, forgive me. Glad to have you on, Alex.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Yeah, man. It's a new year, new you, maybe the same you. We're going to talk all about the training and racing and stuff that you're going to be doing this year. The whole point of this podcast is to talk about how to pick races or events or goals that benefit you, and how Alex has walked through that process and which ones he's going to pick this year. And that's going to teach us all maybe some things that we can do when we're picking out our goals this year. Alex, you've last year raced the Lifetime Grand Prix, did all the other marquee big events. You also did some other international racing too. What are your main goals this year? You're in the Lifetime Grand Prix again, but what are your main goals amongst all of the races you'll be doing for 2025?
Yeah. So I started the calendar with the Lifetime Grand Prix. That's number one priority. So making sure I hit all those events, especially with the changes there. We only get one drop race, which for me means going to every race because you never know what's going to happen.
What's a drop race? We should break that down for people.
Oh, yeah. So there's 6 events in the series. You get scored your best 5 of 6. So essentially with the way it works is, say you got 5 first places and 1 6th place, essentially you would be scored as first place. So it just drops that lowest number. So it's highest score wins in the Grand Prix. So when you're at the end of the season, you get to drop that lowest number or your worst result in the series.
And they used to have 2, right?
Yes. So last year it was 2 drop races. I believe the first year I did it in 2022, it was also 1 drop race. But I think the field has just gotten way more competitive. And with the addition of Little Sugar, I guess the breadth of athlete needed to succeed is also bigger. So a lot of the athletes already have probably 1 race they're worried about. So I think some people may take a drop race. My strategy is just to show up to all 6, especially being an athlete based in the US. It's a little easier for me. I'm not traveling internationally to do so. But the calendar is also more compact this year in terms of the last 2 races are both in Arkansas. So although there are 6
within
races,
2 weeks effectively.
Yeah.
We're almost within a week.
So we'll all travel there and stay for both races. So effectively there's 5 stops and 6 races. So that makes it a little easier logistically. And then Sea Otter's still on the Lifetime Grand Prix, although a gravel race. So that's a drivable race for me from my house. So essentially I just need to travel to 4 spots for the Grand Prix, which is nice this year.
Can I cover 2 things that is unrelated to what I actually was originally asking you about with this, but I just want to get your thoughts. Number one, what are your thoughts on the drop round? Do you think that we should have one? Do you think that they should get rid of one? It seems a bit odd. I mean, think of when you're watching the National Football League or when you're watching anything else, Champions League football, if you were thinking of the fact well, it's fine because they get to drop a round. It would seem so odd to say that. Should we have them?
Yeah, I guess I've never actually thought about how it would look without a drop race. I think it would be interesting not to have one. Because not so much for mechanicals and flats, I feel like that affects the entire field. But I think it would be interesting because there aren't multiple races of the same style in some cases, if that makes sense. So Little Sugar is an outlier. It's the only technical mountain bike race we have in the series. So if they can drop that, then you no longer need to be a technical mountain biker to succeed. So I think if we didn't have a drop race, it may actually show who is a better off-road rider, if that makes sense, from all breadths, right? You have Unbound on one side, which is just 10 hours, super long gravel race. And then you have Schwamigan on the other end, which is our shortest race at about 2 hours and everything in between. I think it'd be interesting if we didn't have a drop race just to force everyone to race that uncomfortable race, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you as well. I think it'd be quite interesting. A lot of athletes have historically just chosen Unbound as their drop, particularly when they had 2 races, they could comfortably do that because it's such a behemoth. It's 200
Yeah.
miles and
I
so gnarly. But now it's kind of, you're really risking things if you just voluntarily skip around preemptively. You're really banking on the fact that nothing will go wrong and you'll have ideal, potential fulfilling performances everywhere else. So it kind
for
of,
sure.
if you just removed all that and it was just like, I got to show up and be ready to go for these races. Yeah, I think it'd be better.
I agree. I think Unbound's going to be an interesting race to watch this year because I think there's a learning curve in how you handle that fatigue mid-season. Luckily, this year, if people are forced to do it for the first time, Tusher has been removed. So they actually have 2.5 months before Leadville, if they're not doing any other racing, that is. But I think it'll be interesting to see because I feel like the athletes who took it on from the beginning have kind of learned how their body responds to a 10-hour race effort and what they need to do to not have it essentially derail their season from a fatigue perspective, which is definitely possible if you don't treat it with respect in terms of what that effort takes. Like personally, I take an entire week off, no bike after Unbound every year and just kind of reset, which has proven to work really nicely for me and make it so I can be set up for the rest of the year. But I think from both perspectives is people racing it for the first time, how are they going to actually do in the race? But then to watch how that affects the entire season for that athlete.
Yeah. There's another question. This might cause some controversy. So we'll be ready for it. Let us know your comments down below. But the Lifetime Grand Prix has their final round, Big Sugar, on the same date as Gravel World Championships over in Nice. Gravel World Championships this year is said to be a course actually somewhat intentionally planned to favor athletes that race in the United States versus what, and maybe favor is the incorrect term, but for contrast purposes, it isn't what we've seen prior to this in Europe, particularly this past year, where it was primarily a road race with like dirt sectors within it, but nothing really technical, nothing, like what we see very commonly in the gravel stuff here in the United States. But the challenge is our athletes, if you're racing the Lifetime Grand Prix and you skip the final round, you are no longer included in the overall of the series. You're excluded from it. So effectively all for naught in terms of overall prize money, points, and the narrative and everything else that exists for that. So in a year where our athletes, and probably where USA Cycling has the budget to be able to send over a really substantial team because it isn't an Olympic year, our athletes are going to be forced to not do that. I had this solution in my mind and I wanted to run this by you, and maybe we can see what other people think of this. Well, first of all, let us know if you think, should World Championships change their date? Or should Big Sugar change the date, their Lifetime Grand Prix? Let us know below. Second question, should Lifetime Grand Prix allow athletes to skip the last round and still? I can see why they don't want them to skip. Like, totally makes sense for the season narrative. And then the solution that I want to run by, why not have Little Sugar on a Saturday and Big Sugar the following day on a Sunday? I mean, you guys are professional athletes. You guys, now I understand that it doesn't provide as much economic stimulus to the region of Bentonville. I get all that, there's that whole side of things. I also understand how it could be complicated for the event organizers to do back-to-back two such big events. I understand all that. But it does seem like it would be a cool thing to have in the Lifetime Grand Prix to have a back-to-back thing. I mean, y'all are pros and you race stage races. You do back-to-back things. Like that's normal, but in the Lifetime Grand Prix, it's never had a spot. Do you think that with all that said, would you like to see that change? How do you think the riders would fare doing that brutal mountain bike race one day and then the brutal gravel race the next?
I mean, probably the athletes that have succeeded at Leadville and SBT when that was a thing, probably be the same ones that succeed in that scenario. I think it would
probably benefit you, right? Because
yeah.
I mean, you're really good at stage. I mean, you have significantly more experience than the vast majority of the people that you're competing with at the front, and doing not just road stage races. Mountain bike and off-road stage races are different. Like it's a different type of fatigue. Yeah, I think it'd favor you.
Yeah, I think it's a possible solution. I think we have to accept that the UCI is absolutely never going to move world championships. So I think Little Sugar and Big Sugar are big events in the US, but have to understand that they are not a world championship. So if anything was going to happen, it would need to be those two events that moved. And I just can't see a situation where it sets the athlete up for success. If you move both events up a week, then you're racing 3 weekends in a row, finishing with world champs. You're flying to Europe 5 days before you race. If you do a double header and then world championships, same situation, but even more fatigue in the legs. Hot take, if the UCI wants to make gravel like it is in the US, you could just have world championships in the US. So ta-da, it would be exactly the same. So I think, it's a bummer. I know Lifetime has those events set for second weekend of October, first weekend of October, like same place in the year every year, but there probably should have been some due diligence there in terms of understanding those athletes want to compete on the world stage, which also benefits the Grand Prix, right?
100%.
And showing that, hey, we are competitive on the world stage. Like Matt Beers winning Cape Epic, Howie winning Cape Epic, it shows the world that we didn't just make this little series so that we can be professional athletes. It's that we created a series that is essentially our own little Europe. We can travel domestically within our country and make a living doing it. So I think it adds legitimacy to the Grand Prix, and it's a bummer that scheduling conflict happened. With that said, I'll actually do marathon mountain bike world championships this year, and that's the weekend before Schwamigen in Switzerland. So
September 8th or something like that. Yeah. Somewhere around there.
I think it's 6th. September 5th, maybe. It's the Saturday before Schwamigen. So, but it's also a month after Leadville. So the timing works out quite nicely. So do Leadville, take a little rest, already be acclimatized to altitude because it's in Verbier in Switzerland. So it'll be in the Alps in altitude. And then I'll be there probably a week to two early, race that, and then the day after I'll fly to Schwamigen and do Schwamigen. So luckily that World Championships, which I'm more interested in, suits me. And I know there's probably a couple other athletes within the Grand Prix that'll also do that. And then I guess going back to your original question, the third big target for me this year is I'm doing Cape Epic for the first time in March with Zach Calton, which will be also in the Grand Prix, which will be super exciting. That's
previous podcast guest as well. You can see other episodes there. And actually, we're trying to work out the details right now to get you guys to record some podcasts during the race to share your experience. Audience, if you'd be interested in that, will you let us know? Drop a comment in Spotify if you're listening, or YouTube. Let us know if you'd like to have podcasts and what you'd like to hear from Zach and Alex. Because it's not like when I raced Cape Epic and I was, with the relative punters, with the average age groupers. Instead, this is pointy end stuff at the pro field.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I don't know if we can bake it in, but similar to Ask a Coach style, it'd be cool as people watch on YouTube the race unfold. If they have questions, if they send them in each day, and then if there's few enough, Zach and I can try to roll through and answer them all. If there's not, then we'll rely on Jonathan to trim them down and give us the best ones. But if there's any behind the scenes stuff you're interested in, or something happened, or there's a part of the course that you were curious about, or anything, we're open books and happy to answer it. But I'm excited for that one. It's been a bucket list race for me for a long time. It's the premier mountain bike stage race, 8 days, probably over 30 hours. So yeah, excited to get after that one.
Oh, so you've got Lifetime Grand Prix, which is going to stretch from, effectively, you're going to be stretching from April all the way to October. You've got Marathon Mountain Bike World Championships in early September, and you have Cape Epic. Those are the three main focuses for you.
And I'll do Levi's Grand Fondo, which has become, I'd say, the premier one-day road race in the U.S. They're putting a massive prize purse behind that. I believe it's $20,000 for a one-day win, and it goes 10 deep. What it's worth too,
it's probably the most worthy course of the big, in terms of a course worthy of the best one-day road race in the United States. Man, you can't beat it. It's incredible.
And it's just amazing to be out there. If you get the opportunity even to ride it as a Grand Fondo, I would highly recommend it. It's a super well run event, and it's, yeah, on some of the most fun roads there are. I would not pack anything under a 30C tire, but
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
it's definitely fun.
Yeah. So, man, okay, you've got a lot. The big thing that we tell athletes usually is like, don't pick too many A events. So, how are you going to approach this? Like, which ones are you going to prioritize more above the rest? And how do you figure that out?
Yeah. Believe it or not, that is actually a pared down calendar for me. I do have an issue of being very excited to race bikes and choosing a lot of events. But spread throughout the year, it's actually not a crazy load. So we'll go into Cape pretty fit. It'll be 8 days, but that's kind of like also the last little build for the year, which is a cool way to do it. We found out last year doing Andalusia and Swiss Epic that I come off stage racing really well with the proper rest. I'm flying at that point, so we'll come back and it will be 2 weeks to Sea Otter, and then Levi's is the weekend after that. One thing I was careful of is last year I had a few triple header weekends, which proved to be difficult from a personal perspective, just in terms of being away from home for 3 weeks is a long time, as well as just it was a little too much, I think, with the full-time job. Not so much that the job wasn't flexible, but just got a lot of mixed stress going on. So I tried to make it so that I only had a few times where I raced back-to-back weekends. The first one's going to be a little easier. Like I said, Sea Otter is driving distance. Levi's is very close, so we'll stay up there for a little bit. And like we mentioned, a nice area, so Jen will come and the dogs can come, and we'll do that. So that's the first double header. The next one would be Worlds and Schwamigan. And then the last one will be Little and Big Sugar. So we only have it a few times in the year. So kind of spacing out those A events. So we'll come through Levi's, like I said, with that form. We'll probably take a little rest after Levi's and switch to more of a, I guess, the typical Unbound block, or I'll call the Instagram block that everyone loves to post because it's massive hours. Probably do something close to back 30-hour weeks. Not a huge amount of intensity, just a huge amount of time on the bike. That set me up last year well for Unbound. So then we'll go into Unbound, probably take, like I said, a week off after Unbound, and then start the build for Leadville. We will be in Breck this year from mid-July to mid-August because my wife, Jen, got into the 100-mile Leadville run. So we're doing Lead Couple. So
new challenge.
Yeah. So we're excited about that. Actually, something we're looking into, if people are interested, is kind of, we wanted to do some sort of content piece on just, I guess, that part of our relationship in terms of how she'll support me at the Leadville 100 mountain bike, and then I'll turn around and crew her at the Leadville 100 run. So
that'd be cool.
If people are interested in that, let us know, because we can try to make that happen, at least Wild Productions style with a GoPro or something. Then we'll come out of that, and Worlds will be next. Like I said, I'll probably go out to Switzerland a couple weeks early. It's a big target for me. It's a good course. It's, I think, 15,000 feet of climbing, probably a 5-6 hour race. So I think it'll be really good. The day after, I'll fly to Schwamigan and finish that block with Schwamigan. Again, take a little rest after that, and then get ready for Little Sugar and Big Sugar. So
it sounds like most things, and like you're not planning on like, I need to be in my absolute best form on the prologue of Cape Epic, absolute best form of my life for Levi's and Sea Otter. When they're coming close together, you're kind of understanding the fact that you're going to build your way into, and then you're going to kind of hold on to things as long as you can, but not try to stretch it too far for those events. So you're kind of like, you're not expecting to be absolutely perfect 100% across the board at every one of those races and they come in close succession. Instead, you're allowing for variance.
I think that's the hardest one, but not so much with my physiology in terms of, I think we don't need to be peaking into Cape Epic because I have an ability to drop off less in those stage races. Like I find day after day, I may be doing the same power numbers, but it puts me further up. Like when we were racing Swiss Epic, my partner let me start with the leaders on the last stage, and it started with a 35-minute climb, and I was with the front four at the top of that climb. But it wasn't anything crazy in terms of writing home about power numbers. It was just, I think I can hold that fatigue a little better. So I think that's what we're relying on in terms of Cape Epic. That will also be the last stimulus for the peak that we will carry through, through Sea Otter and Levi's, which they're close enough that we can carry that. And then from then on, the calendar, it sounds like a lot of races, and it is, but as a professional athlete, in terms of we can come off Levi's, take a dip, then we can come back up, peak for Unbound, turn it completely off, have time to just 100% rebuild. Then we can peak for Leadville. Then we have enough time, since it's a month, to dip and then peak again. So it's, in terms of how we do it, it may not be a peak in the traditional sense of like we build for 6 months and then we peak for this one event, because we don't have that luxury. But the calendar is spaced out nicely enough that we can kind of peak, let it off, do a few weeks of training to peak again. So we can be on top form for all these races that way, in terms of how the calendar is spaced out. It is a lot of races, but like I said, they're grouped nicely, right? Like Cape Epic starts in March, and then we have these 2 races in April, and then we don't race Unbound till the end of May, and then we don't race Leadville until August, and then Worlds isn't, and Schwamigan isn't until September. So we kind of have these times to let off the gas and then let it build back up. So
yeah, typically we recommend to most athletes that you have somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere around there, to between true peak events, right?
Yep.
But if you have an A race, or if you have like 4 races in a month, that you pick one of those to be the A.
Yep.
And likely, or ideally, it's somewhere like around the second, third mark of that, so the 3rd week or something. And then you can stretch that out for another week, maybe even 2 weeks. After that, it gets kind of tough to hold on to, quote, a peak, right? Where it's, it's probably not a peak anymore. You'll get found out when like the deep fatigue will start to come through.
Yeah.
Even though you'll still be able to put out really good numbers, particularly for shorter durations, you might not have the actual, you have enough fatigue that your body isn't able to operate effectively. So it kind of sounds like you're following those. I mean, those are basic periods or principles of periodization. And those,
I think we're just shrinking those periods because we don't, like I said, we don't have the luxury of 6 to 8 weeks between all events. But we also, if you zoom out, we periodize the season, right? So from Cape Epic to Unbound is actually one season. And then from Leadville through Big Sugar is actually a second season in terms of how you look at it. And that's why we take the time off after Unbound, completely off the bike for a week. So it's the same concept, but shrinked to the size we need. And I think we can peak in different ways, right? Like we can carry load and then shed fatigue, and then that will essentially make you peak. We can carry it through from one to the other. Like when we're doing Sea Otter to Levi's, we can kind of keep that peak, so to speak, not let too much rest into the system kind of thing. So I think there's a few tricks in there. But also learning at this level what you can do in the Lifetime Grand Prix. And I think there is a piece of experience there, having done the series multiple times. I'd say last year I executed the best I ever have. I was excited to race Big Sugar. I was on form at Big Sugar. I mean, I looked at the file. My flat took me 1 minute and 10 seconds to solve on the side of the road, and then I bridged back up to the front. So it's like, for me, the result wasn't there, but I know the form was in October, which was a big goal at the beginning of the year. So I think the biggest thing I carry from last year is, like you're saying, during those rest weeks and those off times is also kind of turning off my brain. And the way since I'm very numbers oriented, the way I look at those rest weeks is like, I essentially flip the script. I shoot for the bottom of the range. Like everything is the least I can do. Like the spins I'm doing this week, right? Like I'm shooting for the very bottom of that range. And the goal is to feel better at the end of the spin than I did at the beginning of the spin. And some spins, me and my brother will just go ride mountain bikes and I won't even look at the power meter. We'll just ride for an hour and a half, chill. So I think learning that piece of
for
it.
you, we should put some context to that. For you, that's a chill ride. Like your brother's a really good mountain biker, but he's not on your level in terms of fitness, right? So while most people might be going out on a mountain bike ride and no matter what, inherently they'll be over threshold. For you going out for that ride, you're going to be far below, right? And and it's probably very mentally healthy also to unplug from the numbers.
Absolutely. And I think that's the balance we've learned is like these big blocks. Like I just got back from Maui doing 10 days. I can be my usual self, like nail everything, nail the nutrition, nail the sleep. But then when we come back from that to absorb it, flip it, and what's the least I can do today? How can I make today easier? How can I relax? How can I get more sleep? Can I take a nap? Stuff like that, I think has really paid off. Big peaks, big troughs has kind of been my mentality.
I like that. Wow. That's a common thing that I see with a lot of amateur athletes when we analyze their careers here on the podcast is that there isn't enough polarization in terms of the true sense of the word, right? Where like those rest weeks are not very restful and those hard weeks typically aren't hard enough. And the reason that they aren't hard enough is because you didn't take enough rest. So you just can't do enough, and so any other insights that you've accumulated over the years in terms of what is important to do, particularly when we're talking about like when you're in that specialty phase where you're like around your events? Have you, like you mentioned the fact of during your easy weeks, you like flip the script and you shoot for the bottom of the range. Is there anything that you found during when you're trying to maintain that fitness from peak to peak and doing all that? Have you found anything that's helped you?
Personally, in the specialty phase and near races, I absolutely love over-unders. That's a personal thing, but it just makes me feel the same as in the race in terms of you go over and you're just bleeding out of your ears and you still have to do like a percentage of threshold. You can't just get off the pedals. And I think that's a lot of what racing is you punch through the top of the hill, but then everyone's not like, oh, zone 2 now, guys, zone 2. Like,
yeah, if only
you have to keep riding with whatever pace people have. So I think I really enjoy those for specificity. Overall, I know it's a very hot topic right now, and I'm sure everyone's listened to Tade talk about it in the UAE strategy, but I do a lot of endurance plus, so high end zone 2, and it just builds. It's a way to test a lot of things in terms of you're blowing through a bunch of calories so you can really test your gut and make sure your fueling is dialed and replicate what you're burning in a race. But also it just brings up the floor in terms of what you can handle and how robust you can be. And I think that's been a huge part in the last few years, getting to the end of these 4, 5, 6 hour races ready to go and ready to respond to attacks and still have, I guess, gas in the tank. So that's been huge for me. But
Alex, would you mind if I put up, I'll go through your calendar after this. Would you mind if I put up just like an example of one of your rides that's N plus, so then people can see what it looks like? Because because you're right, it is a topic du jour and it's something a lot of people are focusing on, but I think a lot of people are misunderstanding it as just like, oh, so it's not like actual zone 2, like he's allowing himself to like push harder. But in reality,
it's a very flat line.
Yeah, exactly.
I am erg mode.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to put that on screen so you can see. The point with these ones is to not, and the point is to not ease off the gas, like, and to not have
constant pressure on the pedals is how the description is written. I always laugh because when I analyze it on TrainerRoad, it will show you how much coasting you did, and it's always 0. And I'm always tempted to post on Instagram that says, coasting? Never heard of her.
Yeah.
It's essentially you warm up, you ride. The most common one I do is warm up for 10 minutes, ride 3.5 hours straight at 260 to 300 is the range for me, and then cool down for 20 minutes. Sometimes we'll do 5-hour blocks as we're getting closer and in a big build week, but 4 hours is the most common total workout time.
That's insane. 260 to 300. So, but this is a really key point. these higher endurance workouts. You'll see them all through the TrainerRoad catalog, like with tempo workouts of various different kinds. A great example of this is Baxter. It has a lot of small fluctuations in there to keep you focused and interested and engaged when you're training inside. However, it's keeping you all within that zone. The fluctuations we're talking about are very small. They're like Alex said, 260 to 300.
100% would recommend that if you're doing this on a trainer. For me, it's nice to just have little wins along the way, little 3 to 5 minutes, like, oh, do 5 watts higher for 3 minutes. Okay, do 5 watts lower for 5 minutes. It's just a nice way to kind of break up 3.5 hours on a trainer ride. And then also, if people are interested, I don't hide anything on Strava. So you can go take a look at what I do every day. Power's there, heart rate's there when my heart rate monitor decides to be alive.
Same.
Speed, distance. If you're geeky about that stuff, and then also on Instagram, I read all DMs and answer all questions I get. Try my very best. It may not be timely, but I will get to it. So at AlexWildMTB on Instagram, if you have any questions or anything, comments.
Cool. I love that. Alex, within this too, so I'll put that file up so then I will have put that file up so people can see it. A key thing also when you're talking about this uninterrupted riding, because when you ease off, that kind of like resets the clock. It's almost like the days since injury incident in a factory or something. Like you want it to keep
1 minute since stopping.
Since coasting, right? Yeah. And I just want to, for everybody that trains inside or that doesn't train inside, this is a truthfully tangible, genuine advantage that you will get by training inside versus training outside. In some circumstances, like where Alex lives, he has routes where he can get to. But even then, I've ridden with Alex in these sort of circumstances. Alex isn't afraid to scrub brakes on a downhill in order to stay in this power target. But it's complicated to do in certain circumstances. And inside, you can just hit it and you don't have to worry about it. And I think that there's a level of mental fortitude that's built by those not coasting rides, whether you're inside or you're outside, that it isn't like it's the sort of effort where you're out of breath. It's a sort of effort where it's just like, man, this is an easy thing, but it's becoming increasingly uncomfortable. And when you can train yourself to be like, well, actually, I'm okay. I have numbers in my mind to back up that this is totally feasible, that I can continue riding at this. I'm fueling myself. I can do it. And it really builds a lot of mental strength and fortitude too. I can't speak highly enough for high endurance rides in terms of their productivity to make you faster. Really good aerobic contribution. The only thing I will say is that more often than not, when people go out to do a quote zone 2 ride, like an easy endurance ride, they spend too much time toward the top of the zone when it isn't supposed to be like that. And then that does induce more fatigue than was intended. But they're great, very productive rides.
Yes, brake scrubbing is a skill, and shout out to SRAM because those new red hoods paired with a 52 tooth chainring have been life changing. So thank you.
You can hold your power targets. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's been awesome. But I mean, like when I was in Maui, the West Maui loop is definitely undulating, so it takes time to get that brake scrub just right, and you can almost do it on any terrain once you've figured that piece out. But I do have a route here that's very nice out towards Morgan Hill where Specialized is based. It's pretty much all right turns and no lights once you get out of town, so it's perfect for this. But the goal is, and it should feel, that it just slowly ramps. That first hour you should be like, is this high zone 2? And then by the time 3.5 hours is coming, it doesn't bite, but like Jonathan said, it's definitely taking up mental capacity and you're thinking about the effort. And the hardest part for me is we try to do it 90 to 100 cadence for some efficiency as well. And that doesn't come naturally to me. So that's a difficult piece of it. But the studies have shown that even if that's not your natural cadence, you will gain efficiency at your natural cadence doing that. So first, try to just do it high zone 2, no stopping, no coasting, and then maybe try to throw that cadence in there.
You know, that's a good point here too. This is covering a lot of little small Easter eggs that I hope are helping people different than what we intended. But But that we get questions a lot on why do the workout text, when you do a TrainerRoad workout on the TrainerRoad app, you'll see that within it, like it'll have like text prompts that will come up and give you instructions along the way on a lot of the workouts. And we are commonly guiding people to be riding somewhere between 90 to 100. And the reason for that, when you talked about the efficiency, it's a good, when you're riding at those sort of long, sustainable intensities like that, and you're riding at that sort of cadence, it's very effective for fiber type recomposition is what they call it, where basically a lot of muscle fibers that are predominantly fast twitch and are really eager to burn up some sugar and produce some lactate, it tends to send signals so that they should change their nature and switch over to being ones that are not going to be so expensive when they operate, not going to produce so much lactate, not going to do that. And as a result, you can operate at a higher percentage of your threshold with greater relative ease. That's it's kind of like a cherry on top to doing the work, but it's actually a surprisingly effective one to getting that across. So,
oh, for sure. And I think for us, when we're stacking workouts at the beginning of the year, we're doing end plus, but then we're also doing strength endurance. So it's nice because in terms of stacking the workouts and not carrying too much fatigue in one system or the other, it's kind of the equivalent of doing an arm day and a leg day in the gym. It's you're working high cadence at the end plus, and then you're doing strength and low cadence when you're doing those strength endurance, and you can stack them a little easier without carrying fatigue in the same system.
And you're commonly doing those somewhere around tempo to sweet spot sort of intensity when you're doing the lower cadence drills, right?
It depends on the length and what cadence we're shooting for, but most of the time, probably somewhere between 3 and 350 for me, which is zone 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Pretty cool stuff. Alex, I guess last question I want to ask, a Carbs Fuel, which by the way, I saw a pretty cool, this is not, we are not sponsored by Carbs Fuel or anything else, but we are strong advocates for athletes fueling themselves and also for not going bankrupt from fueling themselves, which when you have a power or an FTP like Alex's becomes a real concern. You become actually more expensive per mile than like a car. So depending on which fuel you use. So I saw a cool chart from them the other day that showed that like they broke down cost per gram of carbs, I believe it was. And yeah, they're at the top of the chart. It's pretty darn awesome. So you started using Carbs Fuel last year. Yep. You're still going to be riding Specialized bikes this coming year.
Correct.
Is there anything that you're going to be changing on the equipment or nutrition side this year?
No changes on equipment or nutrition. I am bringing on a company called RideWrap. I believe we talked about it before.
I'm big advocate of that.
Air. But RideWrap and I will be working together. It is a protective system for your bike. Jonathan's a huge advocate. Essentially keeps it new for you at 25 grams for the entire wrap. So we're going to do some really cool projects where they're actually going to do custom wraps for my bikes. So for each race, we're going to have a different one to release. So keep your eye on for that. Follow RideWrap and myself on Instagram if that's your thing. So I'm bringing them on board, but ultimately just feel very fortunate. I've seen a lot of people parting ways with brands this year, and it's a difficult space. I can see it both from an athlete side and working at Specialized. It's just a difficult time in the industry. So very grateful that I will actually be continuing with every single one of my partners from 24 and actually adding to the roster for 25.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Alex, thanks a bunch. I want to be appreciative of your time. Hopefully this gave everybody some tips on periodization and cool to get some insight into like the small things that Alex does for marginal gains with his training and focus and everything else. Like Alex said, you should go to his Strava, to his Instagram, go check it out, go support him and let us know what you'd want to hear. If you want to hear from Alex and Zach during Cape Epic, what you'd want to hear about. And if we can get everything organized, it'd be pretty cool to have some check-ins all throughout that race.
Absolutely.
With that said, and then also, if you're listening to this and you haven't yet tried TrainerRoad, what are you waiting for? Go try it. 30-day money-back guarantee. If we haven't made you faster in 30 days, we'll give you your money back. If you have signed up for TrainerRoad in the past and you haven't used it in a long time, go sign back up for it. It is completely changed. It is amazing. We're working on some very exciting updates that we'll have more news on in the coming weeks as well. If you sign up now, you'll only get faster before those exciting updates come that will do an even better job of making you faster. So go sign up, share it with your friends. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.